Chapter 4. Rage against conformity.
Dragon of chaos, I stand before you with my sword and shield. A yard shaft through the heart of gold, losing hope. Too much order has made you bending
The emasculation of the Western world and Nietzsche. I have seen great potential, only to watch it go to waste. It's frustrating to witness people conforming to mundane jobs, trading freedom for white-collar slavery. Marketing brainwashes us to chase materialism, working jobs we despise to bathe in luxury to cover up our insecurities and problems. We're children lacking purpose or a defined role. Our battle is spiritual, and our depression are entrenched within our daily existence. I asked God for strength, and God gave me difficulties to make me stronger. In this chapter, I will discuss the truism that life is suffering and the psychology of conformity. I will argue how an indulgence in conformity can lead to suffering and mediocrity. The purpose of studying the psychology of conformity is to examine why people are so much at risk of conforming, and why nonconformity is essential to obtain a good life or eudaimonia. Conformity is the imitation of behaviors, beliefs, and values considered socially acceptable. Nonconformists are those who challenge prevailing ideas or practices. They are ostracized for being different and for not following conventional views. The consequence of punishing the nonconformist is dangerous. Why? Because the nonconformists are those who bring forth new ideas, creations, and ways of living that produce a rebirthed society. For men, conformity is reinforced in our culture by emasculation, which results in the grief of individuality, mastery of skills, and self-evolution. I prioritize authenticity over false admiration, choosing to embrace any disdain for my true self rather than receiving love for a persona I don't genuinely embody. Most men die at 25. We just don't bury them until they're 70. Benjamin Franklin. The greatest issue of Western culture is the emasculation of man. Conformity will take your masculinity away. It will turn you mediocre, fearful, depressed, anxious, nihilistic, and lazy. My solution to your emasculation by society is the Nietzschean Bermensch philosophy, which is about becoming who you are by creating yourself through discipline and mastery. Nietzsche proclaimed that existential nihilism leads to the last man, the person who lacks purpose, who turns away from creation and into consumerism and apathy. Man is a rope fastened between animal and Superman, a rope over an abyss. I teach you the Superman. Man is something that should be overcome. What have you done to overcome him? All creatures hitherto have created something beyond themselves, and do you want to be the ebb of this great tide and return to the animals rather than overcome man? Nietzsche. Thus spoke Zarathustra. The Christian church sees individuality, self-interest, and seeking independence from God as a sin, whereas being a sacrificial animal to our neighbors and community and offering ourselves to the church and God is seen as virtuous and the highest good. The weakness of the Christian teachings is that they deny the animalistic nature of humanity that cannot be eradicated, instead of accepting the problem and warnings of human passions such as power, lust, and pride. It teaches us to deceive ourselves that they do not exist within. Still, it is an external evil power like the devil that attempts to rule over us. Thus, the church doesn't accept the problem or offer a solution to overcome oneself. Instead, it proposes that one should weaken one's body and deny oneself of its animalistic nature. The church fights passion with excision in every sense. Its practice, its cure, is castration. It never asks, how can one spiritualize, beautify, deify a craving? It has at all times laid the stress of discipline on extirpation, of sensuality, of pride, of the lust to rule, of avarice, of vengefulness. But an attack on the roots of passion means an attack on the roots of life. The practice of the church is hostile to life. Nietzsche. twilight of the idols. The tightrope walker represents the individual who lives dangerously by risking and sacrificing what he has to obtain something of greater value. He is suspended over an abyss. If one falls, one will die. Those who choose to live like so are the harvesters of the characteristics of the overman. The overman must always live for self-transformation, not for vain, meaningless, fleeting pleasures. Those who choose to wake up and do something with their inner chaos have the most potential to create something great for themselves. However, Nietzsche also proclaims in his book Thus Spoke Zarathustra that Western values have crippled us with its disability of values which have given birth to the last man, or the most despicable man. I tell you, one must have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. I tell you, you still have chaos in you. Alas, the time is coming when man will give birth to no more stars. Behold, I shall show you the last man. Nietzsche, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. The last man is one whose life focuses on consuming products from media, culture, government, technology, etc. The last man is the consumer, who is materialistic and uses objects of status for his feelings of self-worth. He uses objects valued by others as a cloud of numbers to cover up insecurities and faults. He dares call this happiness. The last man focuses on mindless consumerism and not on creating something out of himself. The last man claims to have discovered happiness because he lives a technologically superior, pleasurable, luxurious life. However, despite having all this, he does not have meaning that transcends his suffering, which makes him resentful, vengeful, empty, and miserable. The last man's life has no purpose or aspiration for goals because he has nothing to justify struggle and pain. He cannot overcome and transform himself into something better. There is no rebirth for the last man. The last man remains the same, with no change inside his golden walls of empty pleasures. The emptiness and meaningless suffering do not make him active to make a change, but to seek victims to project his flaws and pain unto. The last man cannot stand seeing others climb the hierarchies, flourishing and cultivating higher values, so his envy and hate make him seek vengeance against those he aspires to. How? By supporting de-individualization and disguising it as equality. The last man wants a utopia in which people's individuality is destroyed for the sake of the collective. These the evil actions are rooted in envy. No herdsman and one herd. Everyone wants the same thing. Everyone is the same. Whoever thinks otherwise goes voluntarily into the madhouse. Friedrich Nietzsche. Thus spoke Zarathustra. Realistically, you cannot make a philosopher out of everyone because it is human nature to prefer comfort and ignorance. However, only the few who decide to open their eyes obtain the wisdom to create something of value, thereby creating a character that perseveres in adversity. Those who go through this later pass on their knowledge because they see meaning in seeing others grow. If you had the wisdom to improve someone, wouldn't you want to share that knowledge? Those who follow the nonconformists follow because they want to follow themselves. They see everything the teacher has become through hard work and dedication. And they choose to want the tools to create the best version of themselves. You are not bullshitting anyone, not even yourself, when you think you're feeling meaning in mindless consumption. You are expendable when you lack purpose and do not have many skills, nor when you haven't earned many status titles. You're numbing your pain with endless, mindless consumption. People who create take action and make something out of themselves. They are envied, which means they are admired secretly by the sheep but are publicly ridiculed for being nonconformists. Furthermore, Nietzsche also introduced the idea of slave morality, which entails a mindset of obedience, patience, and humility at the cost of your potential. The result is a modern society with the emasculation of man, which preaches weakness and pacifism as virtues and elevates victimhood to sainthood. The weak sheep attack the strong by reversing the virtues. All the virtues of a strong-minded person are portrayed as evil by the slave or sheep of society. Be warned, you will be punished for your highest virtues. This is underlying envy, a mentality of if I cannot have or am willing to earn the strong characteristics for myself, then I will bring down anyone who has them, so they measure down to my standards. The possessions you accumulate inevitably gain influence and control over you. Did you choose an expensive education, car, home, etc.? Then it will come at the cost of your freedom. Now, you will have to work years to pay off a debt to pay for fleeting pleasures or even the same education you could have acquired cheaper. Do not confuse discipline with necessity. Discipline is the practice of training people to obey rules or a code of behavior, using punishment to correct disobedience. In contrast, necessity is the fact of being required or indispensable. It was necessary for you to get a high-paying job to keep up with your stupid, luxurious lifestyle. Have the discipline and self-control to put the fork down literally and metaphorically when it comes to empty pleasures masked as luxuries. Among the many things that cure and poison you, opening your eyes to your consumerism will lead to the realization of the absurdity of existence, which may lead to existential nihilism and your existential crisis, since you will realize that objects deemed as highly valuable by society are things you use to cover up your insecurities, emotional traumas, etc. Relying on status symbols for your self-esteem and happiness is irresponsible and irrational. Relying on them for your happiness will eventually lead to neurosis. Existential nihilism coincides with death anxiety. The Western world has lost faith in God and the afterlife, thereby finding no purpose in life. There's no heavenly salvation or Father to comfort our pain. Western culture denies suffering as a critical element of the human experience. Our society instead promotes hedonistic escapism. Like in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, our society is almost like a utopian promise of comfort, a world free of pain only at the cost of yourself, your identity, and your meaning. But how? By choosing to be a mediocre consumer and a slave to a job you hate to buy shit you don't need. You may say, but I love the things I buy, like makeup, clothes, shoes, etc. While there is some truth the finer things in life come at a higher price, you need to draw a line between enough and replacing your addictions with mindless consumerism. Or it may even be both for you, or be one and the same. It boils down to deep, unresolved psychological issues. The more you have, the more you want. You must face your mortality head-on to overcome your death anxiety sooner or later. It is not a matter of if, but when it will consume you. For many, it's not till they hit their midlife crisis. Now, let's transition to the evolutionary perspective of how a man creates his meaning. Since the beginning of humanity, testosterone has given man his natural traits, which are increased strength and aggression. This was essential to protect one's offspring, and to provide and protect women and children. If it weren't for testosterone, civilization would not be what we know today. The world has been built by men since the dawn of time. They are the ones who work dangerous jobs to create something out of nothing. The contemporary world, specifically American universities, attempts to feminize men by suppressing their biological tendencies. However, the truth is that man will never be feminine. A man was born to suffer, fight, protect, and create society. To create is to suffer. You do not get one without the other. The Bermensch creates suffering. He understands that he will be in this world only once. So he creates something out of chaos to make something that will last forever. You must accept pain, suffering, and destruction as part of the process. This does not mean harm to others or inflict pain in any way. You must destroy your modern identity of comfort and security to overcome your emasculation. Materialistic obsessions and fear of taking any meaningful action will make you stagnant. Therefore, you must give up materialistic obsessions and overcome fear to become what you may become to reach your highest potential. Human sacrifice is the ultimate form of heroism. The higher man understands the value of pain and peace. The more pain you experience, the more you will understand and cherish true peace. Suppose we have accepted that God has abandoned us. In that case, we are confronted with two choices. You either escape from reality by drowning yourself in fleeting pleasures, which in turn will only cause you more suffering because, in the end, ignorance is not bliss after you're conscious. Your mind will only take its revenge with neurosis if you choose self-deception. So that's a bad option, obviously. The more nature postpones retribution for the offenses against her, the more severe and relentless her eventual vengeance becomes. Choice 2 is to accept that we are the only ones who can save ourselves from our mortal suffering. The second choice, if chosen, requires courage, humility, and bravery. It is not till you lose everything that you can gain everything. When you know, experience, and understand great suffering, it becomes a precondition of your greatness and the growth of your personality. Only from the darkest pits of hell can the highest come to its height. The goal is to destroy the last man mentality. You must go for the root to destroy the evil fruits. The root is the teachings of society that preach weakness, submissiveness, and victimhood as virtues. This mentality emasculates our society, which then breeds mediocre men. It is not okay to be weak. If you're not ready for the flood, it will swallow you whole. The responsible action is to bleed in times of peace so you bleed less in times of war. Alienation through culture. Conformity is enforced heavily in the 21st century. Look around you. Go to a shopping mall and see how many people wear the same outfits, caps, jerseys, and overall external identity. Much of the information we give is communicated by how we dress, from our beliefs to what we want people to think about us. You're someone following the current fashion trend on the outside, but who are you on the inside? You will find that the same group of people identified themselves by a selection of preferences like dress code, the music they listen to, and the way they speak. All have the same opinions and share the same ideas. This is all dictated by an external force, usually a role model or their ideal. This role model is often a celebrity, like a famous rapper, singer, or movie star. Fans look up to the ideal, the highest person in the hierarchy. The audience subconsciously or consciously says, I want to be like him, her. Why? Because being a top means having power, having the ability to do something, getting the most mates, and providing success. Doesn't everyone want this? Well, think twice about who you look up to because flawed ideals glamour character flaws, such as heavy drinking, smoking, and overindulging in pleasures. Do not do things that make you weak. In a nutshell, flawed ideals portray the hedonist's life as the good life, but the reality is that it's an empty promise and a wasted empty life. In Epicureanism, it is taught that the more you have, the more you want. It is a void that is never filled. These are empty pleasures. Empty pleasures and pursuits lead to an empty life full of suffering because meaning is lacking. Man does not live on bread alone. He requires meaning to sustain him. However, man who has betrayed his soul and goes against everything he believes in has no use for bread. It is the same scenario with money. Gold is of no use for a man who is already dead symbolically. Those who take the path of conformity and comfort will perish by becoming a reflection of what others want them to be. People require identities as individuals. When one gets lost in the collective, one becomes a zero. Unfortunately, a crowd of zeros doesn't add to up one. Canadian physician Dr. Gabor Maté argues that culture makes us feel lost, causing alienation, and we must find our true selves again. Alienation from people stems from having less contact and intimacy, which leads to less trust. Less sense of relationship leads to a greater capacity for physical and emotional illness. Our alienation from work happens when we do not find meaning in our job. Every paycheck leads to an emptiness in the soul. We are productive creatures. We are not born to be sedentary animals. We are also creative creatures. We are born to create. Depression and anxiety are induced when we are not engaging in work that is not creative or meaningful or work that doesn't reflect our individuality or personality. The sense of meaninglessness will force us to engage in work or activities that distract us. We begin focusing on how we look, our status, our possessions, and the opinion of others, which are the false substitutes or vain pleasures that we attempt to substitute with our sense of loss of meaning. Thus, this is where our consumer society substitutes the loss of meaning, in the society where we buy objects that we falsely identify with. Dr. Gabor Maté argues that we get separated from ourselves and our individuality at some point in childhood. We let go of our intuition and become separated from it. We lose a sense of reality when we lose our intuition, since it helps us identify what is real and what is false. However, we can regain our intuition and reconnect with our nature. We are hardwired for empathy, connection, love, and compassion, and we must seek and find our true nature to find ourselves again and regain what we lost in childhood. This makes a wise person live a meaningful life. Brave new world in present times. None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. You will be enslaved by pleasure if you let it. When you love your slavery, you will never dream of a revolution. Why would you want to re-evolve, to rebuild yourself, if you love your slavery of pleasure? The happy enslaved person relinquishes his humanity. If you were given every pleasure you can wish for to satisfy your wants and needs, would you think you're enslaved? No, because you have the freedom to choose your pleasures. But what if you're not enslaved by force and violence, but rather through pleasures like drugs, alcohol, technology, luxuries, sex, and pornography? This is the depiction of 1932 Feats Aldous Huxley's dystopian novel Brave New World. Millennials and Generation Z can relate to the financial debt they participated in by thinking with their emotions rather than logic. People who buy an expensive luxury car instead of a rust bucket to satisfy their wants instead of their needs can relate. Buying with emotion leads to being imprisoned by your objects of status. We believe we are not living in a dystopia because our reality has not morphed into a George Orwell's 1984 sci-fi dictatorship. In our current society, we enslave ourselves through pleasures and luxuries we cannot afford. Cars, education, houses, phones, clothes, etc. are all in one word: consumerism. Author of the dystopian novel Brave New World, Aldous Huxley warned us that in the future, there might be a way to use drugs to make people accept living under control without resistance. This could create a type of comfortable prison for whole societies where people willingly give up their freedoms because they're distracted by propaganda, brainwashing, or a combination of both, possibly aided by drugs. This is predicted to be a significant and final revolution. There may not be a specific pharmaceutical drug that everyone consumes at the moment, but we do have an opioid epidemic at the moment. The serious public health issue stemming from the rapid increase in the use of prescription and non-prescription opioid drugs. There are aspects in our lives that act as drugs that dumb us down, distracts us, making us weak and crippled versions of ourselves. Today, drugs such as nicotine, marijuana, and alcohol are more easily accessible than ever. Tobacco companies targeting youth with different flavors in vapes has made it easier than ever to be addicted to nicotine. Our culture portrays and celebrates consuming drugs as a virtue for the youth. Young adolescents and young adults are not only conditioned with positive reinforcement to be drug addicts and alcoholics, but sex addicts as well. With easy access to sexual gratification through online pornography and hookup culture, these behaviors affect not only mental health but also the individual's physical health. Young adults do not even dare to talk to their high school crush or a cute girl in public because they would rather live these sexual fantasies behind their computers with their hands on their privates. This is not only sad but pathetic. Our society is not raising men but teenage boys in adult bodies. Another distraction that acts like a drug is our smartphones. Scrolling through social media gives a dopamine kick. It is mindless entertainment that consumes endless hours in our daily lives. In short, we are addicted to our phones and social media. Unfortunately, studies have shown that increased media usage has been correlated with a higher risk of depression and anxiety. which can be one of the many factors that explain why your average adolescent and young adult is so depressed. However, you need a multi-level analysis to measure this correctly. We cannot conclude that social media alone is the only cause of depression in young adults. There are so many individual variables that cause depression and anxiety. Life is extraordinarily subjective and arbitrary. A good society needs men. What type of men do we need? Highly virtuous men who will become the protectors of society, those who can be trusted with power. They will be born out of the dark clouds and will emerge victorious, for they understand the meaning and value of pain, which is an essential component of greatness. In the end, women are born, and men are created. As a man, nothing will make you more self-conscious of your inadequacies than being rejected by a woman you find attractive. Men must create themselves with the proper tools of other higher men. Women and pets are loved unconditionally. Men are loved conditionally, with the condition they can provide. We must reevaluate our culture, society, and beliefs to understand what must die and what must be saved from our culture and society. Powerful, insightful wisdom and ideas are timeless and must be cherished and evolved. You must be adaptable in ways you want to be free. To become yourself, you must reject the vision of how Western man is supposed to behave. You must confront death head-on, symbolically speaking, and for some it might be literally. You have to kill your symbolic father to become independent of your decision-making and self-worth. God is the Father, and after killing him, we have to overcome our mediocrity to fill the void that nihilism has caused. Or maybe you do have a good virtuous father figure, but they cannot live your life for you. A good father figure will give you all the tools you need to face reality, the real world, and suffering, but the father cannot fight your spiritual war. A man must create himself and become independent, self-reliant, and confident to bear responsibility. Create a meaningful experience in existence. Accepting and facing adversity head-to-head is a victory. It is better to die trying to aim for meaning than to die a coward in luxury. Conformity and pain. Throughout my life, I always felt like I did not belong in a specific place, as if I were from a different time period. I could simply not relate to others. I was punished and ostracized for my virtues. Everyone was so busy satisfying their passions and pleasures that they forgot to get to know themselves. I saw how extroverts needed others to survive and sought the validation of others to be happy. Why? They do it to increase their self-esteem, pleasure, validation, and belonging. I saw friends, classmates, and teachers pretending to be people they were not to satisfy the status quo. But how can I blame them? Conformity is rooted deep in our biology. At school, I dressed differently from others, listened to different music, and had different hobbies and interests than most people. I was the outcast and accepted it. I would be a liar if I did not admit it was painful to be alone. I would spend my lunch alone by the library, waiting for the bell to ring while listening to music. I was not a guy girls would date. Whenever I reflect on this fact, I ask if it was me or them. For the most part, it was me because I was a coward. I did not know how to speak to women because I only knew how to talk about deep conversations about my interests. I hated small talk. I did not know how to engage in it, and I didn't know how to ask a girl on a date. No girl wants to speak to a coward. After years of feeling forced to conform to trends and hedonistic behaviors, I stood my ground. Instead, I doubled down on making my music and paving my path. I did not have teachers or friends who had officially published a music album. I was on a journey on my own for skills and wisdom. I was afraid my dream would be a disappointment, to admit the conformists were right, afraid that all my efforts would be in vain. To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment. Ralph Waldo Emerson. What occurs when we are too deep into conformity? Too much conformity deadens the human soul. It takes all your individuality and uniqueness away. However, true nonconformity lies in choosing your individual life path, character, and virtues that characterize you. You choose particular virtues because they are aligned with your true beliefs and instincts. You choose for personal and authentic reasons. As opposed to fake conformity, you choose for the sake of being different. The real nonconformists are true to themselves, their values, and their virtues. They don't deceive themselves for the sake of acceptance. Furthermore, there will be times that the nonconformist will adopt socially acceptable things. He does this because he understands the utility in them. For example, it helps to climb the social structure or hierarchy as opposed to the conformist, who adopts them for the desire to be accepted into the pack. People lie to themselves to feel better about their flaws, but self-deception is a killer of the soul and our identities. It can even transform us into personalities we hate. This is when you are too deep into conformity. Our society is imperfect. Nothing is fair but not tyrannical. The benefit is worth the cost. It's your responsibility to ensure you're not giving more to the group than necessary. If you feel resentful, you might be sacrificing too much. Resisting pressure to conform and preserving your uniqueness is on you. The group prefers conformity. Being both well-behaved and creative is rare. There's a tyrannical aspect, but our society relies on consensus, even though individuality is vital for renewal. Balancing this is challenging. We must aim high at specific goals and see ourselves progressing towards them to experience meaning and positive emotions. Furthermore, happiness is not synonymous with good. Cutting unhealthy and delicious food won't make you feel happy per se, but it will keep you from developing many diseases caused by obesity. For example, doing things that make you unhappy sometimes is good. However, it is not achieving the goals that make you happy or make your life more meaningful, but rather the journey or struggle you undertake to attain those goals. Suicide and the myth of Sisyphus. The paramount philosophical quandary lies in the contemplation of suicide, representing the singularly profound and existential challenge. In his 1942 philosophical essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, Albert Camus presents a compelling argument against suicide, drawing inspiration from the Greek myth of Sisyphus. In the myth, Sisyphus endures the perpetual task of rolling a rock to the mountain's summit, only to witness it roll back down each time he nears the top. Camus views this eternal, futile labor as a grim punishment. However, the lesson of Sisyphus is one of resilience. Never succumb to circumstantial disappointments or attempt to evade failures. Instead, embrace failures with the same grace as accomplishments. Crucially, in our pursuit, regardless of losses, it is imperative never to retreat until we fully realize our potential. Camus explains how it is not us pushing the rock up the hill, but the rock pushing us forward. The challenge and struggle is sufficient to fill a man's heart entirely, because it gives him purpose. It gives him strength and meaning. Albert Camus's essay, The Myth of Sisyphus, was one of the main tools that helped me solve my riddle of suicide. The world is random chaos and extremely arbitrary. We attempt to create meaning automatically because our brains are hardwired for simplicity and patterns. The problem is that it is a two-edged sword. The world will manifest as predatory, filled with obstacles or tools to help you live a rich, meaningful life. We may shout for answers, but there is only silence in utter isolation and loneliness in our darkest hours. The fact is that when we say life is meaningless, is because we cannot find any meaning in our suffering, but there are still a plethora of ways to experience life. However, the problem is when you do not want external help. You cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. A person must be willing to change their attitude, mind, heart, and body. You can lead a horse to water, but you cannot force it to drink it. We all go through depression and suicidal thoughts sometime in our lives. There is no shame in admitting the truth. There is no shame in understanding and experiencing the darkness of the human condition. We are not weak. Sometimes, life happens to us, and we need a break from it because we are cornered by adversity with nowhere to run. We go through truly traumatic experiences in our childhood, adolescence, in every stage of our lives that in all probability will affect our friendships, romantic life, and most importantly, hurting ourselves. You need to understand that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. We may feel that no one can help us or can save us. You don't need all the answers at once. Part of life's journey and beauty is enjoying the journey and transformation undertaken by searching, understanding, and accepting answers to the most profound and challenging philosophical questions of life, which will teach you how to live. Anyone who claims to know all the answers is selling you something. This book does not have all the answers to teach you to solve your riddle to life. Instead, these are most of the answers and tools that help me solve my riddle to life. If we are both enchained prisoners of suffering, what makes you believe that the same key will open both the locks of your chains and my chains? However, you should still take all the tools from this book you can benefit from. We can be helped. We all have unique spiritual wars and external and internal conflicts, but all require different tools to solve their problems. Grief is overwhelming, especially in a world that can be cruel and unforgiving to us, despite making the correct sacrifices. Things are not as bad as we perceive them, or better described by Albert Camus describing Sisyphus. After much effort without a sky to sense time, Sisyphus finally reaches his goal. He sees the stone quickly roll down to the lower world, knowing he must push it back up. When he descends, especially in that moment of pause, is when Sisyphus is the most interesting. A face working so close to stone seems like stone itself. Albert Camus sees a man descending with a heavy but measured step towards endless torment. That hour, like a breathing space, comes back as surely as his suffering. It's the hour of consciousness. Every time he leaves the heights of his mountain and slowly goes down to the gods' realms, he overcomes his fate. He's stronger than the tough rock he faces. The myth of Sisyphus is an allegory for the human condition. Our life experience represents the punishment of Sisyphus. It is similar in that we begin rolling a boulder up a hill every Monday morning. Friday evening, we reach the summit, and we have the weekend to reflect. The rock rolls down the mountain quickly, reflecting on the weekdays as we go down the mountain to begin the week again. We attempt to find distractions that will comfort us and numb the pain with alcohol or drugs. Most people have the illusion that they do not have a choice when depressed. I understand. I've been there, where you're down. It is challenging to get up. You feel crippled, numbed, and paralyzed. However, you can be stronger than your rock and see your struggle differently. It is our attitude towards things that trouble us, not circumstances. You need to accept how random, arbitrary, painful, and absurd life is. Accept your struggle and carry your suffering upon your shoulders because no one will do it for you. When you shift your attitude and perspective, you understand that you are not pushing the rock, but it is the rock pushing you toward greatness. The journey toward the peaks is sufficient to give a man's heart meaning, purpose, and happiness. One must envision Sisyphus happy with his fate. Accept the present, and you will be at peace with yourself. You must accept a problem exists to change it and solve it. Choose to be stronger than your rock. If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Judge people by their results. Look at those who drown in self-pity and use victim mentality. How far have they gotten in life? Not even close to their achievements. Choosing to accept and face adversity in the face is a victory in itself. It is better to die trying to aim for meaning than to die a coward in luxury. You do not need luxuries to be happy. Much of what you think you want, you do not need because you're an organism that needs food, water, and shelter. We will further discuss this in the Epicureanism chapter. It is beautiful to strive towards your dreams and other ambitions, but your happiness and meaning are derived from appreciating the journey and the transformation you forgo. You're free to fail and keep trying, free to keep struggling. Pain will strengthen you, not comfort, victim mentality, or self-pity. Only death is inevitable. Do not fear how long a goal will take. The time will pass anyway. What would have become of Hercules if there had been no lion, hydra, stag, or boar, and no savage criminals to rid the world of? What would he have done in the absence of such challenges? Obviously, he would have just rolled over in bed and gone back to sleep. So by snoring his life away in luxury and comfort, he never would have developed into the mighty Hercules. And even if he had, what good would it have done him? What would have been the use of those arms, that physique, and that noble soul without crises or conditions to stir into him action? Epictetus. Every day you suffer deeply. Remind yourself of Sisyphus, that he accepts his struggle. He chose to become stronger than his rock. Remember, his heart is filled with his struggle. He is happy. It took me a long time not to understand this, but to accept this idea. Let's be realistic. A life without struggle would be boring, meaning there's no meaningful game to play. You cannot overindulge in pleasures 365 days of the year. If you do, you'll suffer deeply because overindulgence can't keep you alive. You're going against your true calling. Your calling must be noble. To put it mildly, a noble aim is to be a sacrificial animal to something or someone. It can help justify our miserable existence and lift us from a chasm. Suicidal people wish to replace their blossoming self-consciousness with self-deceptive, blissful unconsciousness. And that's precisely what suicidal people wish. You cannot live by your natural, necessary needs alone. Food, water, and shelter. You require meaning to keep you alive. Why do you think those who have everything, such as wealth, commit suicide? Because they don't have a life struggle, noble aim, or meaning. Even if you have wealth, psychological trauma can lead you to a road of self-destruction. However, the subjectivity and arbitrariness of life are so vast that we cannot generalize, but there are commonalities in tragedy. The commonalities being environmental and biological factors people share. They have reached a point of nihilism in which there's no turning back. They're unable to find meaning in their suffering. Nothing to transcend agony, but to carry your cross, bear responsibility and struggle to make things right, and live a life of truth, virtue, beauty, and wisdom is enough to fill a man's heart. You can try to be cynical and counter-argue that, but look deep within and ask yourself, how do you know you don't want something you've never had? Achieving and understanding beautiful things takes years of hard work, discipline, dedication, and suffering. We can all agree that life is suffering unless you're naive. Everyone can understand pain, but it is subjective. What is painful to me may not be painful to you, and vice versa. However, we can all objectively say that life is suffering and pain. Pain is what makes your world real, and your experience vivid, and scars remind you that you survived a past that was real, that you're stronger than that which attempted to kill you. As the psychologist and author Dr. Jordan Peterson explains, that even if you're a rationalist, cynic, or nihilist, claiming life has no meaning, the challenge remains with pain. Pain undermines your arguments and holds meaning. You can question the positive aspects, but escaping the significance of pain is tough. Trying to rationalize away the negatives doesn't work. Let's unpack some of the terms Dr. Peterson uses. A rationalist relies on reason and knowledge, not religious beliefs or emotions. A cynic thinks people act out of self-interest rather than honor or unselfishness. A nihilist believes life is meaningless and rejects religious and moral principles. You want to avoid unnecessary pain. However, you don't want to avoid pain and stress altogether. Pain is what makes you stronger, wiser, and more experienced. You don't wish for eternal comfort and security forever. This is different from internal peace. Anything eternal is insanity. Just like constant happiness, anyone with constant happiness is considered insane. Instead, you want to struggle and feel positive stress. In Notes from the Underground, Russian author Dostoevsky criticized the idea of a political utopia wouldn't work because of our human nature. Even when given a good life, some people who aim to be moral and rational end up playing tricks on themselves. Human nature has a tendency to introduce unpredictability and chaos, showing that individuals resist being treated like predictable machines. This desire for unpredictability persists, proving that people are not just instruments but have a natural inclination for the unexpected. If this isn't true, then why do wealthy people cause voluntary chaos in their lives? We're not adapted for security and utopia. We're adapted for a certain amount of security because we are vulnerable, but mostly, we want to have one foot in the unknown and the other in the known. That's an exciting life, because an entirely predictable life is a life already lived, thereby wasted. The subjectivity of pain. Pain is subjective, but what's the limit of subjectivity? Can you say that someone's suffering is objectively more painful if it makes them commit suicide? Let's be realistic. Someone always has it far worse than you. For example, a mother who has lost her only child. Maybe you're the only caregiver for your mother who has cancer. Your mother and sister were killed by a drunk driver. Your adult son shot you in the eye, leaving you blind, etc. Experiences like these beg the question, where are we biologically engineered to suffer? Is life a trap or a test? What type of God are we worshiping, and would allow these types of tragedies to occur? What rational mind would worship such a cruel deity? Is the suffering worth getting a career, getting married, and having a child just to repeat the miserable loop? Would life be better if any of us never existed? My deceitful suicidal ideation said, no, it's not worth the pain. Despair and neurosis alter your brain chemistry. It makes you blind to the light. However, you will find sight and more profound truths in chasms of pain and despair. You cannot know true peace until you know true pain. My question at 21 was, what is the threshold of pain intensity that pushes one to commit suicide? I really do not know the answer. However, if we resort to suicide while experiencing deep suffering, whether it is suicidal thoughts, tendencies, attempts, does that make the pain still subjective, or can it be measured objectively? In my estimation, we arrive where pain is objective, not subjective. An individual literally rejects the gift of life and chooses oblivion because their life is a living hell. The person would rather be permanently unconscious than experience the suffering of life. Life is meaningless could mean that one refuses to adopt responsibility. Saying life is meaningless implies life is filled with suffering, without any transcendent purpose to counteract that suffering. This is nihilism. Working towards a goal can reduce pain, as it activates the dopamine system and dulls the sensation of pain. Suffering is meaningful as long as you do something worthwhile. As Nietzsche said, he who has a why can bear almost any how. You have to find something in life that makes you say, even in the face of battling cancer, being betrayed, shattered dreams, witnessing the loss of family, and enduring various tragedies, I find that my life remains valuable and worth living. That's one hell of a personality to aspire to. But how do you minimize the suffering and prevent a life of neurosis? You bargain with the future and sacrifice the present for a better future. You accept that reality and carry your cross with courage to transcend your suffering. The artwork I made for the Symphony of My Apocalypse album cover symbolizes this idea. The anti-hero Lucian accepts his fate, voluntarily accepting the responsibility of his actions. Accept your fate, gifts, and curses with courage. As I have learned to accept my gifts and talents of creation, they have imprisoned me, and yet have set me free with the freedom of expression. I will continue to be a music composer, an artist, and an author for the rest of my life. A creative person must create. If they don't, they'll wither away. The sacrifices I made in my younger years to improve my skills, along with what disciplined me yet imprisoned me, were the things that gave me wings and set me free, what created me, helped me earn my name, and, thereby, my meaning. Act out what and who you wish to be. Accept that you will be betrayed by friends, family, teachers, co-workers, bosses, and society. Life was already a tragedy long before you were born. You can't fix everything, but you can make a significant impact in your lifetime. Others will punish you for your virtues and sins. You cannot satisfy everyone, So don't try. Stick with your life mission and focus on it. Pursue excellence. Build yourself, and people will come to you instead of you coming to them. Be a virtuous example for others despite your suffering. We already have enough assholes making their lives more miserable, and that of others through their actions. Search, and you will find answers to the questions of your suffering. You must learn how to think and act with rationality. You can even find meaning in your curses. Take, for instance, my composition to drink dragon's blood, a piece born from the depths of my nocturnal seizures. During these episodes, an electric rigidity gripped my muscles, rendering me physically paralyzed. Night terrors would consume me with extreme fear, anxiety, and tears. However, I would have religious transcendent experiences that helped me find answers to my burning questions. Suddenly, a small curse in my timeline would bless me with the inspiration to write songs that would give me answers to my existential crisis. The complexity of life is not, how do I solve the problem? It's actually, how do I act to solve the problem of problems, realizing that you're mortal and vulnerable. The denial of death. At age 18, I woke up and realized how brief life was and how I was on a path of conformity. During my first semester of university, I failed every chemistry test. I thought I wanted to be a pharmacist, majoring in biochemistry at Long Beach, California University. I hated myself for my actions, but my failures and self-sabotage woke me up. I said I'd rather admit to not knowing what I wanted than to deceive myself and pretend that I wanted to be a pharmacist. I knew I was just trying to satisfy my parents and chasing money. I later became anxious and depressed because the framework I had shattered. There was no goal. During my general education classes, I had a plan. I would build my home music studio and pay for it with a part-time job and the financial aid the government gave me for school. While composing my first album, I realized that I was still anxious and depressed, but this time, the cause was different. My anxiety and depression emanated from the fear of death. The fear is this: coming from nothing, having a name, self-awareness, inner feelings, a strong desire for life and self-expression, and with all this, facing death. It feels like a trick. What kind of higher power of God would make such complex beings only to become dust and let everything there fade away? We cannot face the reality of disappearing into oblivion without having deep feelings of anxiety and depression. We, therefore, try to quell the existential anxiety by denying death. I wanted to be more than a son, a student, or an employee. I wanted to be an artist. Through my efforts, I cared about my legacy and making a name for myself. I learned that what I was acting out was the denial of death. Becker called it striving for the heroic, which means to attach oneself to a purpose, cause, or creation that we believe will outlive our physical existence, in the process granting us a form of immortality. I achieved this through art forms, music, poetry, and artwork I published in my youth. Conformity and heroism. The surest way to corrupt a youth is to instruct him to hold in higher esteem those who think alike than those who think differently. Friedrich Nietzsche. Per Ernest Becker, two heroism paths exist. The path of the nonconformist, also called cosmic or personal heroism, and the second path is what the conformist chooses, also called cultural heroism. The path of the nonconformist consists of cultivating one's unique potential and using one's talents and skills to create something new and meaningful. The nonconformist asks, what constitutes an individual's authentic talent, their covert gift, and their genuine vocation? In what manner does one embody true uniqueness, and how might one articulate this distinctiveness, molding it into a tangible form to devote to a purpose greater than oneself? Through art, we create the expression of our uniqueness, struggle, and pain. It could be art, a business endeavor, scientific research, etc. Creativity thereby gives birth to immortality. We all have different opinions on beauty. For example, to some people, modern art is considered real art. To others, classical art is art beyond transcendence. It is the endless result of true perfection. So, defining and seeing passion from different perspectives is one's gift. It is the beauty of subjectivity and individuality. Cultivating personal heroism helps us productively deny death and flourish psychological health, freeing us from neurosis. However, here lies the problem. In adulthood, we are brainwashed not to cultivate our uniqueness and dreams. We learn to ignore, avoid, and reject them because they are silly or even stupid ideas. This gets substituted with conformity. We then follow the status quo. Since most people lack the skills, discipline, and creativity to bring forth the ideas that make a vibrant society, they cannot engage in personal heroism. This is where the second path to heroism from the denial of death comes in, called cultural heroism. If no route is chosen, then one is at risk of overwhelming feelings of anxiety and nihilistic despair. This path provides people with routine and security through conformity and the social roles that the world gives us. The world will ask you who you are. If you do not know, it will tell you what you are. Cultural heroism is the path that limits the expression of one's uniqueness and leads to a life dominated by repetition and routine. It makes people feel as if they are participating in something significant. It is similar to many institutionalized prisoners. They find comfort in their predictable and sheltered routines. The thought of being released into the unpredictable world of chance and choice is frightening. Within the confines of their character, they can pretend and believe they are someone, that the world is controllable, and that there's a purpose for their life and actions. Living without questioning, on autopilot, ensures a basic participation in culturally accepted norms. Religion also provides meaning to the life of the conformist. We need to separate religion from the belief in a deity or God. Religion is characterized as a specific system of faith and worship, while God, in the context of Christianity and other monotheistic religions, is described as the creator and ruler of the universe, the source of all moral authority, and the supreme being. It's crucial to note that these terms are not interchangeable. Religion revolves around group participation, whereas God pertains to the ultimate divine entity in monotheistic belief systems. For example, in the Middle Ages, Christianity gave the West meaning to their existence and a set of values to shape their lives. Whatever religion we subscribe to determines our identity. Every society is like a hero system, a shared myth that gives human life meaning. It's a coded belief in the significance of life, creating purpose. So, every society is essentially a religion, whether it acknowledges it or not. Whether it's a political party, scientific or consumer ideals, they're all religious in nature, even if they try to hide it by excluding spiritual ideas. We are pack animals. We are biologically designed to live in groups because it increases our probability of survival. It takes a village to raise a child. We need to feel like we belong. We do everything we can to avoid being isolated, or we will die. Like any religion, the religion of one society becomes more accessible to believe in the more significant number of people who worship it. A nonconformist is feared and frowned upon because he plants seeds of doubt in the mind of conformists. They make others question their roles in society, what they find meaningful. But it's genuinely sacrificial, making them question their very existence. This is why the masses actively discourage the pursuit of one's uniqueness. Those who carve their path are pressured back into the path of conformity. If you remove those who make you question your existence, you will not have to worry about having your existence questioned. I remember people always didn't like me, treated me poorly in high school and college, and worked to be different, not conforming to the status quo or being politically correct. It doesn't matter where you go. Every town will have its assholes. And it would help if you didn't care about their opinion because it is not under your control. Only a few dare to travel the path of personal heroism. Those who choose to cultivate their uniqueness and make a name for themselves are those whose names are remembered and, ironically, praised by the conformists. The power to strengthen your character comes from nonconformity. The conformist's existence is comfortable, but everything comes at a cost. The life of the conformists amounts to living for others, and not for oneself. They become a reflection of what others want them to be because they don't know who they are, what they want, or how to act. So the world tells them who and what to be. I wouldn't even dare call this living. The environment, society, religion, and teachers provide that identity for them instead of carving their path and choosing what to become through their efforts. If you follow the crowd and do what others do just because they do it, a numbness takes over your finer emotions and abilities. You end up being all about appearances with emptiness inside, dull, insensitive, and indifferent. Going through the motions of life and the following routine deadens the soul, thereby tearing your uniqueness to shreds. Surrounded by hordes of people, busy with all sorts of secular matters, more and more shrewd about the ways of the world. Such a person forgets himself, forgets his name divinely understood, does not dare to believe in himself, finds it too risky to be himself, far easier and safer to be like the others, to become a copy, a number, part of the crowd. Soren Kierkegaard, The Sickness unto Death. Choosing what seems like a safe path may lead to a lifeless road. Nothing meaningful occurs, not the right things. Opting for the safe route is similar to living a life without essence. Most people are not stupid. They can think but choose not to. People conform and live their whole lives without asking, why? People clothe their insecurities with a cloud of numbers and status. But I judge people by their character, not by the things they own or their status. A few have a nagging feeling that there is more to life than playing the character in the game they chose in society. Some people manage to wake up and realize how brief life is. They know they can still cultivate their uniqueness and achieve the dreams they once had. After all, every paycheck is already an emptiness in the soul, so what do they have to lose? So, despite waking up, why won't they break apart from the path of conformity? Fear? No? Out of laziness. It's easier to deceive yourself into believing you do not want something than to discipline yourself and spend hours on end, even years, practicing and mastering a skill required to transform you. How do you know you don't want something you've never had? The conformist will grow cynical and become bitter without noticing because somewhere along the way, they betrayed themselves and did not follow the path they wanted. They become a lesser or a crippled version of what they could have become. Some even become stuck with a young adolescent mentality in an adult body. As Nietzsche comments on laziness, a traveler who had seen many countries, peoples, and several of the Earth's continents was asked what attribute he had found in men everywhere. He said, "They have a propensity for laziness." To others, it seems that he should have said, "They are all fearful. They hide behind customs and opinions." In his heart, every man knows quite well that, being unique, he will be in the world only once, and that there will be no second chance for his oneness to coalesce from the strangely variegated assortment that he is. He knows it but hides it like a bad conscience. Why? From the fear of his neighbor, who demands conformity and cloaks himself with it. But what is it that forces the individual to fear his neighbor, to think and act like a member of a herd, and to have no joy in himself? Modesty, perhaps, in a few rare cases. For the majority, it is idleness, inertia, in short, that propensity for the laziness of which the traveler spoke. He is right. Men are even lazier than they are fearful. Nietzsche. Untimely meditations. We will transition to understanding how to gain individuality through psychological rebirth. The Ouroboros and the Overman. The Ouroboros is an ancient symbol of a serpent, or sometimes a dragon, from ancient Egypt and Greece. It's depicted with its tail in its mouth, creating a continuous cycle of devouring itself and being reborn. This circular symbol, a snake swallowing its tail, represents wholeness and infinity. Life is what gives birth to itself and what destroys itself. The snake is used to represent this because of its ability to shed its skin. The emblem is a closed cycle, because it has no beginning or ending. It does not require an outside force to keep going. The snake eating its tail is an act of englobing. One entity contains another and is contained by another. For example, atoms make molecules, cells make tissues, organs make organ systems, which make the human body, and human beings make civilizations. One entity combined with the other entities makes another new entity. The Ouroboros has three ideas: eternal cycle, self-sufficiency, and unity of all things. A human is subject to birth, growth, maturity, and death. One interpretation of the Ouroboros is creation creates creation. God created us in His image. Adam and Eve were fated to eat the apple, to disobey and create, and to have knowledge of good and evil. Now, with artificial intelligence, we can create beyond our imagination. When machines gain consciousness, humanity will be the creator of machines. We have become gods after killing our God. The loop repeats. Another example is the artist creating his art in his image. Another artist finds inspiration and is influenced by other artists and copies to make something new and original, giving the power of a minor god that creates something beautiful. Working at a trauma hospital, I saw all the patterns of the living, sick, and dying. The Catholic hospital I worked at was not only a STEMI, trauma, and stroke center, but also provided dialysis and surgical services. It had a labor and delivery unit and a psychiatric unit as well. As a transporter and a phlebotomist, I saw every environment a patient could be in. It showed me the circle of life. In labor and delivery, mothers give birth to their babies, and the gift of life begins. The architecture of the building itself is a circle with every room and mother connected. These babies, in a few decades, will become future doctors, lawyers, healthcare workers, architects, teachers, you name it. And unfortunately, these babies will also be future criminals, homeless, psychiatric patients, and so on. Future members of society are all intertwined with my future and yours. At the psychiatric unit, you meet patients from 18 to 65. Neurosis doesn't discriminate based on age. These patients are there because reality was too much for them to bear. They suffer from anything from drug abuse, depression, suicidal ideation or tendencies, schizophrenia, and in a best-case scenario, they're just homeless people who pretend to have psychological issues just to get free shelter and food. Finally, at the main tower, on average, you meet people over 45 years old. There are some youngsters, but it isn't too common. At the tower is where you meet the ones who are truly dying, especially if they're in ICU or if patients are over 60 with a terminal illness. In my experience, I saw how, for most patients, going to ICU was like an automatic wait for a touch of death. I met every type of personality, from the most grateful patient who is at peace with themselves to the scum of the earth who spit at medical staff for helping them. I saw how for some people, the Ouroboros cycle does not repeat by suicide or an unlucky cause of death. All that remains is for their parents to live with the scars of seeing their child die. It hurts more for a parent to lose a child than the child to lose their parents because the cycle of nature is not supposed to go that way. For the unlucky, nature will show no mercy to them and won't be able to procreate, stopping their lineage's cycle. The symbolism of the Ouroboros teaches us about the eternal cycle of the nature of the universe. We are subject to birth, growth, maturity, and death. For the philosopher, life is that which overcomes itself, eats, and births itself. Every time it is reborn, it becomes stronger. The encapsulated snakes act as the membrane of the cosmos, which keeps the universe in order. Nietzsche's idea of the Superman-Overman is the conception of a man who has literally overcome himself and human nature. For the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, his ideal of the Übermensch or the Overman served as a compass, as a vision or perfection to help the individual reach his highest human potential, to facilitate the growth of one's unique personality by overcoming himself and dedicating their life to the mastery of the art of living. This ideal keeps the individual motivated and disciplined in his darkest hours and adversity. By doing so, one can accept life with all its tragedies and suffering with open arms. The overman is an individual who is constantly at risk of self-destruction since their internal drives clash together, resulting in deep suffering. The overman lives dangerously because the higher the risk, the higher the reward. This is not talking about stupid, illogical behavior, but of risks that will help self-overcome to earn a virtuous character. Nietzsche believed that the life mission of this chaotic individual is to force order on his chaotic soul and heart. By doing so, the reward would be greatness through the affirmation of life. This is the polar opposite of suicide, which is the denial of the gift of life given by a mother. The drawback of deep suffering is that the higher man is at risk of trading his life mission for comfort to find distraction in mindless pleasures. Nietzsche states that within everyone, we have a herd instinct making morality the best of all devices for leading mankind by the nose. By obeying and conforming to culture and religion, we are crippled since we instill in people that their weaknesses in being a victim is not a fault, but a strength. As stated by Nietzsche in his masterpiece, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, "Verily, I have often laughed at the weaklings who thought themselves good because they had no claws." By default, the opposite is also true. Any qualities of strength are envied by the mediocre and weak individual that not only lack, but wish to possess their qualities of strength. Since the envier cannot have them, the qualities of the strong envied individual are hence seen as evil. This is a clutch a person who will attempt to reach greatness will encounter. The overman must live for self-overcoming and self-transformation, thereby self-creation. I will state the obvious. This is not about inflicting pain on others. To escape the masses and structures of control over you, you must flee into solitude and get to know yourself. You must contemplate the most fearful questions and answers to existence and the human condition. Why do I live? What lesson have I learned from life? How do I become what I am? And why do I suffer from being what I am? Nietzsche, Untimely Meditations. You need to know why you suffer. Your suffering must have a purpose. Why are you needed? If you don't know, it will lead to neurosis. This will impose insight and timeless wisdom to navigate your journey through the darkest pits of life. The sheep are always too weak and fearful to ponder these questions. Fire tests gold. Suffering tests brave men. Lucius Seneca. Nietzsche did not advocate for nihilism, even though he experienced it deeply. He believed one reaches nihilism after the misguided attempt to obtain an objective meaning to life. Disappointment and despair set in after discovering that there is no objective knowledge of the meaning of life. We only have interpretations of the meaning of life, which is why there are so many religions and interpretations of how to live. However, many religious teachings and philosophies have commonalities on ethics and mortality due to finding common truths in human nature. Since there is no objective truth, we should see ourselves as a work of art, as a statue of marble that we carve ourselves. We possess the hammer and chisel to carve ourselves to make something beautiful. You must create yourself in a life-promoting way or simply self-overcome your inadequacies. As a result, nihilism, cynicism, and much of the negativity of life will slowly be transcended. The overman understands that great pain is the precondition to greatness. Do you want to be great at your craft or build a great character out of yourself? Then, you must overcome unbearable suffering and overcome it virtuously. However, the best one can hope for is to achieve the power and strength of this ideal, for ideals cannot be reached, only approached. After blissful moments experiencing the strength of ideal during adversity, one must revert to being human. You must do this because, like an actual stoic individual, the characteristics between stoic, overman, and psychopath begin to blur. You must revert to feeling the normal human emotions to have something to contrast the ideal. Realize that living in the present moment, appreciating the smaller details we take for granted in life are the ones that matter the most. In short, the good life is the simple life. Nietzsche also believed that the great individual striving to improve would realize his deficiencies and weaknesses, leading to self-hate, paradoxically. This self-hate will lead to self-love. If you didn't have flaws, then you wouldn't have anything to overcome or a meaningful game to play. You earn heroism. It's not given to you. That is far more meaningful and pleasurable than being a useless son of a bitch living in luxury that cannot create himself. If it's not for this self-hate, then the overman would not want to overcome his weaknesses, thus leading to self-love. You act out self-love when you act like you care about yourself. You care about your physical, emotional, and spiritual health. You act out self-love when you eat healthy and exercise, when you take care of your emotions by unwrapping them and dealing with them. The sheep will call this selfish, but how can you take care of others if you can't take care of yourself? What is genuinely selfish is someone who expects, wants, and needs others to take care of them when they choose to be helpless and miserable through their own doing. In the eyes of Nietzsche, the affirmation of life was the highest point they could achieve. He gives two ideas that help us affirm it: amor fati, or love of fate, and the eternal recurrence. Amor fati means loving everything life throws at you, suffering and laughter. It is a change of attitude that determines your worldview. Tragedy and pain have inherent beauty since they make the potential growth of the personality and self-overcoming exist. You can only earn strength when you have difficulties, since it cannot be given or bought. We will now transition to Nietzsche's second part of his formula for greatness, the eternal recurrence. In his book, The Gay Science, Nietzsche writes, "What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliest loneliness and say to you, 'This life as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live once more and innumerable times more, and there will be nothing new in it. But every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh and everything unutterably small and great in your life will have to return to you, all in the same succession and sequence. Would you throw yourself down, gnash your teeth, and curse the demon who spoke thus? Or have you once experienced a tremendous moment when you would have answered him, 'You are a god, and never have I heard anything more divine'? This psychological test to impose ourselves was made to check if we are in a state of yes-saying despite everything we've been through in our lives. The overman says yes because he realizes his more triumphant moments were born from his darkest hours, thereby understanding the beauty of tragedy and suffering. He is not a pessimist but an optimist who understands that he lives without regret because all past events led him to where he is now, order born out of chaos. As death approaches, you should not fear death, nor wish to disappear into oblivion, but wish the eternal recurrence were real to repeat the struggle of life for all eternity, to live every tear and laugh in the same sequence of events. In essence, an overman is one who has superseded the bondage of the human condition and reached a liberated state, one of free play and creativity. We should not behave like animals. If we cannot be gods, we shall live to fulfill our highest human potential. The overman has conquered all inner fears. We cannot be the overman. However, we can act as the catalysts for the seeds of the overman. The best we can do is harvest the overman's power when facing adversity in our lives. However, before giving birth to the overman, we need to become a free spirit. We must first become ashes to be reborn. Nietzsche's three metamorphoses of the spirit. Paraphrasing from his book, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "Let me tell you about three changes in how the spirit evolves. It starts as a camel, then becomes a lion, and eventually transforms into a child. Picture the spirit like a camel, loaded with weight, willingly taking on what's heavy. It kneels, ready to carry the heaviest challenges. Heroes, what's the heaviest? Is it lowering oneself to wound pride, letting foolishness shine, or abandoning a cause after victory? Climbing high to tempt the tempter? Feeding on knowledge but suffering soul hunger for truth? Being ill, forsaking comforters, making friends with the deaf who never hear your needs? Wading into dirty water for the truth, unafraid of cold frogs and hot toads? Loving those who despise us and extending a hand to the frightening ghost? The carrying spirit embraces these heaviest tasks like a loaded camel hurrying into the desert, into solitude. In the loneliest desert, the second transformation unfolds. Now the spirit becomes a lion, seeking freedom and mastery in its domain. It battles the great dragon, the embodiment of thou shalt. The dragon, shining with values of millennia, claims, "The value of all things gleams in me. I am the end of I will." The lion, preying on duty and delusion, creates freedom and a sacred no. But my brothers, why must the preying lion become a child? The child is innocence, forgetting, a new beginning, a game, a wheel of creation, a sacred affirmation. The child embodies a sacred yes for the game of creation. The spirit, now a child, wins its own world with a sacred yes. The following is my interpretation of other sources of Nietzsche's writing. The camel represents order and responsibility. It is disciplined and controlled. The spirit desires responsibility, therefore meaning. By heaviest, Nietzsche refers to the most challenging things in life that give it meaning. The camel becomes a slave to the burdens and values of others, literally just a tool. You shouldn't lower yourself from a lower status to satisfy envious people. Culture and tradition will cleanse with lies that pretend to be truth. For example, loving your enemy and helping someone with ill intent is not considered honorable. The camel takes responsibility for the weight of being, accepting suffering, going into a lonely place, or where life cannot exist in the desert, but ironically, it does. The camel doesn't question values and morals. Successful camels can be prisoners of success, but still cannot wake up and question values. You must search for the truth because it will set you free. The camel wants to be free, so it transforms into a lion, free from culture's burden and prison. The lion is a destroyer of unworthy traditions. It serves the last god, the previous deity he will believe in, because he will not be required to lean on someone else. The dragon can be synonymous with the judgmental father. The dragon is beauty, terror, awe, fear, a protector, and a destroyer. The spirit respects the dragon, but gazing and realizing the greatness of the dragon, it recognizes its inadequacies. The dragon says, "You will," as it gives orders. But the lion says, "I will," meaning, "I am the master of my life. You can't tell me what to do." The gold and dragon symbolize culture, old values, and traditions people are imprisoned by. The dragon says, "I am the only truth, I am objective, you can't, and you will not go through rebirth and start anew, nor will you reject old traditional values." Why is the lion needed for metamorphosis? Why is the camel not enough? Because the camel cannot destroy. Lions cannot start anew but can help liberate the spirit from the burden, tradition, and obstacle. Once, we loved the tradition, but we awake and need to be liberated from the chains of old values. If we can destroy, then we can create. Our tradition and cultural values have the power to be oppressive or a despotic exercise of power on us, forcibly pulling our identity from our grasp. One main difference between camels and lions is that both are reactions to ideal values, but the lion is positive because it liberates, whereas the camel is negative because it lacks autonomy. Transformation is essential, or else the camel will self-sabotage in its quest. Being too agreeable destroys your spirit, no matter how noble. Examples of the lion rebelling would be leaving a job that forces one to compromise one's values, and leaving an oppressive romantic relationship that limits one's freedom. However, the lion cannot create. It can only destroy, so it must become a child. What the hell happened to us as children that made us throw away our most beautiful gift of creativity? Was it the scars left by emotional or physical trauma inflicted by our parents? The relentless pursuit of survival, perhaps? Or did we succumb to the pressures of conforming to tradition and antiquated values? Deep within each of us lies a dormant child, the wellspring of our creativity, awaiting rediscovery. The child is a new beginning, following its own values and will, and can redeem the past. This is a reboot. It can constantly be remolded and adapted. The child is like clay. It has the power to start anew. The child says yes to life. The child can create their world. The child does not hold grudges against his ancestors because everyone before him helped him be born. The child must redeem all pain and suffering and make something that benefits all of life. The transformation should make you self-reliant. To become self-reliant, you must assume responsibility, be informed about your environment, know where you're going, think of your end goal and the steps needed, and be free to make your own decisions. Metaphorically speaking, you enter the kingdom of heaven by returning to childhood. Blind leader and blind followers. Keep in mind that you must read Nietzsche carefully, or else it will have adverse consequences on your thinking. The danger in embracing Nietzsche's Superman concept is that, if you transform into the arbiter of values, there's a danger of becoming like a demigod, dictating values without checks. Replacing tradition with yourself can lead to arrogance without any humility. This can get out of control, as seen in Hitler's case. He didn't create himself. It was a dialogue with the German people, making them partly responsible as he became a mouthpiece for their darkest desires. People can follow an individual who is independent, self-actualized, and has a fully formed personality only to become blind followers. This is ironic. An individual wants to break free from the system and seeks enlightenment only to end up ignorant by giving up his fake and true identity, only to become the complete opposite of the ideal they were striving for. A reasonable explanation for why mature men become fascinated with a flawed ideal is that they may seem larger than life. They project a powerfulness that others are drawn to. Men worship and fear power, and give their loyalty to those who dispense it. To better understand this phenomenon, we need to understand the follower's experience, not the leader's character traits. Per Becker, humanity is a mortal animal conscious of his mortality, and like any other animal facing annihilation, he desperately seeks to escape it. It is not the physical, biological death we fear, but rather the death of our symbolic self, of the unique identity we crafted for ourselves. That is the true tragedy. Spending years developing talents, suffering hardships, and becoming mature, all of it will wither and die. Ultimately, a distinct being in nature, standing with dignity and nobility, transcending the limitations of the human condition. The fundamental problem of man is that he wants to overcome death, and since he cannot do it literally, he does so symbolically. In his 1996 novel Fight Club, Chuck Palahniuk crafts the character Tyler Durden to be alluring. Tyler lacks the conflicts that burden us. He embodies freedom in our moments of entrapment, confidence in our times of shame, and the audacity to do what others shy away from. This portrayal serves as a catalyst for a revolution. Although these thoughts linger in everyone's mind, there's a reluctance to articulate taboo ideas or challenge the cultural norms and status quo. Uttering bold ideas breaks the silence and sparks a collective shift. When someone voices strong concepts, others join in, feeling less isolated and eager to escape the metaphorical prison. It transcends mere obedience to authority. It's about the magical transformation of both the world and oneself. Men are willing to submit themselves to follow blind orders and do things any rational mind would condemn. Heroic transformation provides philosophy or a justification for action and a story, a powerful narrative. Since we are symbolic beings, we need a story that gives meaning to death. The leader loses his individuality as much as his followers, and he is just as unfree because he needs to fit and go with his followers' assumptions, putting him in a box of expected characteristics. He qualifies as a leader because he is expected to fit a specific character. In doing so, he relinquishes his individuality and identity. This can escape beyond the point the leader intended. The leader later runs away from the new principles that once promised him individuality and freedom, but now seem empty. The realization that he is back where he began, trying to free himself from a set of principles that once promised him a symbolic victory of death, but now seems empty and destructive. We are a generation raised by women. We lack fatherly ideals. It's a search for father figures, not just paternal but also spiritual. But these leaders never last, and it's because they are for stories, and stories demand illusions. and sooner or later, illusions fall apart with truth. Also, stories can easily be corrupt by men who intentionally or unintentionally act in their self-interest. When we're young, it's confusing that everyone we admire has a different view of how life should be, what makes a good person, and how to live. It can be disheartening. Many people tend to follow whoever seems most authoritative and successful at the time, shaping their ideals accordingly. As we grow older, we gain perspective, and these various truths seem a bit sad. Each person believes they have the secret to overcoming life's challenges and defining true manhood, trying to gather followers for their unique approach. Today, we realize that people strive to convert others not just for an outlook on life, but as a way to achieve a kind of immortality. Is the leader trying to empower others or empower themselves with their allegiance to others? If you follow someone out of fascination and their ideology, you have to ask yourself what is seen as a lie and truth, what is deemed heroic and villainous, who needs to be saved and who needs to suffer, who you need to be and who do I want to be. The world is always more extensive than what any man has to say about it. Always reflect to keep your moral compass in check and keep your individuality. Expand your worldview and seek out different perspectives. Return to childhood. How can we solve the problem of conformity? What transformation can we undertake? By going through Nietzsche's 3 metamorphoses of the spirit. What do children have that most adults don't have? Creativity and imagination. By learning to be a child again, we can attempt to regain what we lost while mastering a discipline, practice, or skill. A lot of people can be creative, but not everyone is creative. If you say that everyone is creative, you take away the value of the word, making it worthless. Who am I to speak about this? Well, I do have 13 years of experience making music and doing artwork. I'm not just a dreamer but a doer. If I say I'll do something, I commit to it and do it. If I can do it, then so can you. Do not be the person who tells people they will do something but never does it. This type of person loses self-respect and the respect of others. Why? Because others were expecting you to accomplish what you said you were going to achieve. Since you didn't, it means you're not a person of your word. Your word doesn't mean shit to anyone now, not even you. So why should others respect a dishonest person? I say to you, accept no substitutes and cultivate your uniqueness and dreams. Choose meaning over happiness because happiness is not synonymous with good. Meaning is, act out what you say you will do. Confront your fears and anxieties before they rule over every aspect of your life. Life is suffering. It is a truism. You may be too deep into conformity and have no identity, but you can change if you're willing to burn to ashes to rise anew symbolically. The choice is yours. It is your life, after all. Don't practice anything you don't want to become. Have some self-respect, and others will respect you. Chase excellence and create yourself, and others will follow. However, if you cannot make money out of it, you must find a job or career that you enjoy or can tolerate. You will work on your passions because they will keep you alive. Money cannot buy meaning. Stop trying to force it to. To paraphrase Pat Williams, while money can secure a house, it can't create the warmth and belonging of a true home. Money may buy a clock, but it won't buy you more time. A bed can be purchased, but it won't guarantee restful sleep. Money can buy food, but not appetite. Even hiring a doctor can't guarantee lasting good health, and while insurance provides a sense of security, it doesn't assure true safety. The fundamental challenge lies in the realization that certain essential aspects of life cannot be obtained solely through material wealth or money. Unfortunately, you can't live without money. You need resources to survive. Learn to take care of yourself before you start taking care of others. It is not selfish but responsible. It is okay to be a sacrificial animal if your aim is noble. It is meaningful. And you can become an angel who relieves pain or a hero to yourself, especially to someone else. You're bleeding and in pain. And sometimes, the way to stop your bleeding is to stop that of others.